Hello, and thank you for joining Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. My name is Ashley Burrell. I'm the Secretary of the Board for Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. We will be producing monthly podcasts featuring women of color in the peace and security field, so please visit WCAPS.org regularly for more details.
Our series of dialogues, speech presentations, engagements with leading practitioners and agencies in the field that is working on security, nonproliferation, and related issues. These dialogues are supported by the Garter Foundation, and which is basically trying to support and sustain interest in nuclear security over years. Our program has specifically designed to sustain interest in a bipartisan level engaged people. The opening presentation in the series was by Christopher Ford, Assistant Secretary of Control, and we've had other people, Andrea Halls, both recently, she's NC advisor to this area. Today, we're very fortunate to talk about the issue of how to develop next generation expertise, how to gain a broader perspective and insights into nuclear security and nonproliferation issues. And I'm going to thank Ambassador Tony Jenkins for organizing this topic, and she'll talk a little bit about it in the program in a second. In terms of logistics, we will go for until there'll be a break in the middle. There are restrooms behind there, as well as the kitchen, which is on the fourth floor. There's food and drink out there. If we run short of something, let me know and I'll get some more. This is being live streamed and so it'll be available for future viewing. We'll try and run out a summary for Hudson and the website and so on. But for now, just please join me in thanking the ambassador and your presentation.
Thanks, Richard. I want to thank the Hudson Institute and Carter Foundation for doing this and being co-hosts with WCAPS. Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Resolution. It's a long time. My name is Bonnie Jenkins, and I'm the founder and president of WCAPS. And of course, it's great to see all of you here this morning. It's always tricky on a Monday morning. But it's great to see that the room is just about full. There's only 2 seats left, so that's really positive. WCAPS is a new organization that I founded last year, and it's really because I've been working in the field of WD for many years, so mass destruction, and I wanted to see a new generation of people coming into the field, and particularly bothered by the fact that there's not a lot of people of color in the field, but also heartened by the fact that I'm starting to see some more young people of color getting into the field. So one of the questions I ask is, why are the challenges? What are the challenges that exist? What are the key challenges that exist? But also to hear from women who are in and ask how they got into it, how they got interested into it, and also ask just a couple of guys also to also be part of this and help us understand their perspective as well. So it's really an opportunity to not only hear from the young people who are getting into the field, but also to hear from think tanks and foundations and the government representatives to hear about what they're doing and the challenges that they've seen in their work in this field. So we wanted to just have an opportunity to have this discussion. The goal is to actually continue this advocacy because we're going to be, WCAPS is going to be partnering with Stimson Center and Hudson Institute and a couple of other organizations and individuals to continue this conversation and to see if there's practical ideas and steps and ways forward to try to address this issue. I know there's been studies that have been done on this issue, so we want to incorporate some of the analysis and conclusions that have been made by some of the studies on diversifying the field overall, to women in terms of color, and see what we can learn from those things and see if there are practical steps that we can lay out, that we can tell people about things that they should issues they're trying to diversify the field. The first panel, a couple of the things, I passed out some flyers about WCAPS, and there's also some note cards that's on the middle table. If you want to join the membership, just fill it out. It's free. We can take this up that in the conversation. The first panel is going to be a number of colleagues and people who I highly respect for both think tanks and foundations, but also we have our government representative, Michelle, who's done a lot of work in this field to try to diversify the area of nonproliferation. So I'm really looking forward to this first panel. And then the second panel is going to be a number of young people who work in the field, intermediate field, I'm interested in the field, and just chat a bit about how they got into it. My own story is a bit of a surprise that we didn't plan on making semester structure. And then there's similar stories about other people as well. So it gives us an opportunity to see what lessons can come from that. There's stories about people who had mentors who introduced them to the issue of the nonproliferation. So if it wasn't for that person would have not gotten into it at all. So the people who tell stories about, I'm the only person of all my friends who care about this issue. And it's a challenge for me to stay in it because I know some of the things that we think is much more interesting and also very, very important to everyday life that people get into in certain respects. So, we'll hear about some of that as well. What I'd like to do is introduce our first moderator. I want to make it clear that these are not, obviously, this is not a panel in the traditional panel. This is more of a conversation. And we invite you to be part of the conversation. And so we will have time for questions, but we're asking our moderators, Leah and Brian, Senator, to moderate kind of a conversation and then have you an opportunity to ask some questions. So first, I would like to introduce our first panel. Actually, I'm going to ask Brian to introduce the panel, or they can introduce us. But I would like to welcome Brian to the stage, or to the stage. He's the CEO of Citizens Center. It's a real pleasure to have Brian for many, many years, as I know many of the panelists for many years. So it's really great for this.
You're so sweet.
One thing I want to mention to people who are watching on participate, just feel free to email me, and I'm happy to read your comments or questions to the audience. My email address is White, it's just my last name, WBISBC at Hudson.org.
All right, thank you for that, Richard. Bonnie, thank you for that. I feel like I'm in an echo chamber here. This is too loud. You need to tell me to be quiet. Thank you, Bonnie, for putting this together, and of course, Richard, for welcoming us here to your home as our host here today. We know, of course, that encouraging diversity in the workplace is not just the right thing to do, but study after study has proven that it facilitates innovation, that it creates a very different and very positive workspace. For those of you that may have spent a little bit of time at the Stimson Center, you know that we're not really a typical looking think tank, that we have quite a broad age diversity. We have diversity in terms of our racial makeup. We have very good representation. In fact, my wife often criticizes me and says, we need to hire more men in that organization. And 70% of our senior directors at Stimson are female, which is very, as you are quite aware, peculiar for an organization, a think tank that works on national security issues. We view this not just as I say, the right thing to do to encourage this diversity, but in fact, we've come to look at it as part of our, in fact, competitive advantage in the wider think tank environment. We believe that diversity is what makes us unique and what really gives us, I think, an edge oftentimes in this town, in this space that we compete in. So we're going to talk about all of those things. But let me just say that as smug as we may be at Stimson in our diversity, and we can always be doing more, and we all should be working to do more. I also am part of a secret club, Michelle, that meets annually. It's the gathering of think tank presidents, and yes, that gathering is as exciting as your imagination is conjuring up right now. And I will tell you that as I sit around that table, and that table looks a lot like me, and me plus 30 years. And I will tell you that around that table, no one has ever said, you know what, diversity is not a good thing, or I don't see the value in this. Or I think everyone around that table does recognize that there is value. They also recognize that we have a problem in this industry, that it is a challenge that has extended back, many, many decades, clearly, across the sector. The challenge, I think, for many, and this may be controversial for me to say, but we're going to work through all of this together. They don't know what to do about it. We don't know what to do. What are the pragmatic activities that we can do? And there are restrictions. Some of it is budgetary. Some of it is tactical, that they literally do not know kind of how to kind of widen the aperture and encourage diversity across this industry. So I really do, Bonnie, commend you for picking up this challenge and encouraging us in a very pragmatic way, and essentially help spoon feed us and that wider group on how we can, as I say, meet the objectives of your new organization and meet the objectives I think that we should all share, which is, again, encouraging greater diversity, not because just it's the right thing to do, but because it does encourage that innovation and improvement across the sector. So, in order to facilitate that conversation this morning, Bonnie has pulled together, along with Richard, this blockbuster panel that is sitting to my left, and I'm going to do. Their bios are available, so I will not belabor this. I will just very quickly run down, so you know, for those of you who do not, who is with us. So on the far side is Alex Toma. Alex is the Executive Director of the Peace and Security Funders Group. She has a great experience for this conversation. She spent time in the private industry, in the NGO sector, in philanthropy, in government. She's done it all. She can't keep a job. But she is one of the coolest people in Washington, D.C., so I'm really pleased that Alex, you are here to join us. You can join us here today. Michelle Paul is the Deputy Director of Nuclear Export Controls at NNSA, the National Nuclear Security Administration of the Department of Energy. Michelle, we should all be very grateful for your government service and for you being here today. Thank you for joining us. Richard Weitz, our host, is the Senior Fellow here at the Hudson Institute. Thank you again, Richard, for welcoming us to your home. And Michelle Dover is in the house. Michelle leads grant making at the Plowshares Fund, and again has a wide experience in this space, and is going to help us, particularly those of us in the nonprofit industry, understand what grant makers are looking for, which is maybe the most important message that we all hear today. So, I'm going to, as Bonnie mentioned, we really don't want this to have this is not a panel discussion where we're all going to bloviate you at you until 10:30. But instead, we're just going to facilitate a conversation, and that conversation is going to involve all of you. So this is participatory. We are going to expect all of you to participate as much as our colleagues up here at the front of the room. Before maybe we draw you into that conversation, Michelle, I want to start with you, if I may. So you're sitting in government, you're dealing with one of the most consequential issues of our time, the nonproliferation of weapons of mass destruction, particularly nuclear weapons. Why is this a particularly important issue in this space when you are aiming at such a consequential national security mission? Why is this issue of diversity such an important issue that you're wasting time with us this morning to come and talk about it?
Well, first, let me, thank you for having me here, Bonnie and Hudson. First, let me give a little bit of background about what we do in defense of nuclear nonproliferation at NNSA. So that'll help inform my answer. So at the very basic, our mission is to prevent nuclear and radiological materials, as well as the equipment and the know-how from getting into the hands of bad actors who would use them to make WMD or dirty bombs. So that's a very basic description. Now we have a number of complementary programs to help us implement our mission. So we've worked with foreign partners, foreign countries to install radiation detection equipment at airports, seaports, other border crossings. We have work with foreign countries to strengthen physical security, material accountancy at nuclear facilities that store or use nuclear radiological materials. I have to plug my own office. We work with foreign countries to strengthen their export controls so that dual-use items or commodities, things that could be used, have both civilian and military use, don't illicitly leave their country. And we also have an R&D arm that works on detection, monitoring, and verification technologies and supports our mission. We also work to reduce the use of weapons-usable materials, highly enriched uranium and plutonium. That said, I just mentioned some of our programs, not all. In any given year, we're working with over 50 countries across our division. These issues are technically complex. So for these reasons, we need a diversity of approaches, both in our R&D space. We also work in order to get access to facilities. In order to do our work with foreign partners, we need to negotiate memorandum of understanding, statements of intent, action sheets. We need people who understand both the political, economic, security currents in these regions that we work in. And so for all these reasons, we do need a diversity of thought and opinions and approaches. So that's why it's important.
Thank you. So, Michelle Dover, for the purposes of this, your name's now Dover, right? It's just
Perfect.
Same question. So, as you in the philanthropic space, in the foundation world, you similarly are looking out, obviously, and trying in certain ways. How important is this in your community, and what kind of are you doing about it?
So, first of all, thank you to the hosts for this. This is a really fantastic place for a discussion. We're really excited to join. I think I should differentiate, when you talk about foundations, right, there's a lot of foundations out there working on a variety of issues. Some foundations have already incorporated diversity lenses into their work. I would say that the security space, it's different. I would say that all of the foundations do care, and you do have a track record of foundations like Ford, who started initiatives many years ago to try to figure out how you diversify the field. And at the core of it is this sense, kind of along the lines of what McKinsey studies found, is that you get better ideas when you have more diverse teams. They serve a wider population, they're more sustainable, in part because of how ideas are generated. And so it becomes an issue of organizational strength. It becomes an issue of how well those ideas are going to float in the market, if you think of the NGO space as more of a market. And so for us, it is important. I would say that we haven't, from Plowshares, it's not something that we've deliberately incorporated into our work until the past couple of years. And so we're looking at ways of how you can encourage that diversity, recognizing that where money goes and who receives the money does impact who's in the field and who's doing work.
And so, Alex, maybe I can go to you on that, just to build off of Dover's point here. You sit at the hub, obviously, of a much wider network of philanthropic funders. Is this a wider trend you're seeing across the industry, and how deeply located is it across the sector?
Yes and no. So the Peace and Security Funders Group, we're a funder network, 63 foundations and philanthropists. Our mission is to enhance the effectiveness of funding in this sector. We, at our last annual meeting, which was about a month or so ago, we had our only plenary session on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the importance of that in our sector. And you all touched on a lot of the reasons why we're doing this, so I won't belabor those points, just to echo and agree with them. And our folks in our network are at different starting points. So there are some, like the Ford Foundation, a member of our network, MacArthur, who's funding this, have the expertise and capacity in-house to be a little bit more advanced. They have folks in their HR departments, they have folks looking through a DEI lens. There are some of the smaller funders, perhaps, that are, just don't have the internal capacity, which is where we come in. So we're right now looking at what is our role in this space? What is the role of both the four-person nonprofit PSFG as well as the wider network across our members? What I would say is that everyone, as I think you said, everyone, and Michelle Dover echoed, folks in this space recognize that we need to do something. We just don't know exactly what it is, what our role is, what we could be doing, how fast we could be doing it, what are the different things internally and externally that we could be doing. And so we're figuring that out with our members hand in hand. And what I would say is that I would just say that patience is critical because you are at sort of different levels and folks are starting at different starting points, but complacency is not okay. So we need to be doing something and chipping away a little bit somewhere, however, wherever, you got to start somewhere. So that's sort of where we're at right now, is folks recognize that there's a problem. And what does that look like to address it as a whole? Is that second sort of part two conversation?
This may be another question, Alex. So you obviously have this purview looking over the national security space. Do you know if we are relatively further ahead or further behind other sectors?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. And so I connect with other funder affinity group leaders in the space, human rights space, climate space, etc. I think we're about the same, to be honest, as other sort of sectors. I could be wrong, so if anyone else in the room knows better, we'd love to invite you in. But I think we're about the same. I think folks are sort of, there's a problem, trying to identify lots of root causes, what can we do specifically in philanthropy to address this. But I would say that anecdotally, we're probably about the same as some other sectors, yeah.
So, Richard, when people in this room think diversity, they think Ryan Finley and Richard Rollins. Tell me why you are doing this event here at Hudson. What was the impetus for this?
Right. There's a clear explanation, and then as Ambassador Jenkins suggested to me. So I admit, when I originally put together Security Summit, sustain congressional interest. We talked along with this, but to my ignorance, I did not include anything on kind of diversity. And then, as soon as the ambassador mentioned to me, I just thought, sure. I mean, we have a need to renew the workforce in this area. We certainly have a need, given where we're going the last 2 years. We clearly need new ideas to reverse some adverse trends. And I thought that the MacArthur platform this ongoing dialogue would be perfect for that. So that's thanks to the ambassador.
Interesting. So let me turn a little bit and talk about, as I alluded to, I think that we're learning as we go along in this, in trying to attack this challenge. And to my mind, some of the best ways we learn is to learn what has worked and what has not worked. But maybe before we get to that more kind of concrete conversation, we can talk at a little bit higher level in terms of what the challenges are. So can we scope the problem and understand what the impediments are to access so that we can kind of scale our responses accordingly. So Michelle, maybe I can come to you and maybe ask you, how lonely is it inside the U.S. government, and what are some of the challenges that you have seen, either witnessed firsthand or witnessed others as they try to break into the field? Can you talk a little bit about sort of the very macro level challenges of others?
Sure. So I think one of the main challenges is getting the word out to our young people that this is a viable career option for them. And they need to see people in the field that look like them who are working in the field and succeeding in the field. So getting the word out is one of the main challenges, and then via government, we can get diverse pools of qualified candidates for positions. It's hiring. it comes down to the hiring. You can do outreach to universities and colleges, even outreach to middle and high school students, but then it comes down to someone looking at the resumes on their desk and making a decision. And so I think those are some of the challenges. I think, and I don't know if you want me to talk about some of the things we're doing at NNSA right now, or you want to wait for. So I just want to highlight a couple of programs that we have in place at NNSA. One is our NNSA Graduate Fellowship Program. Now, this is a year-long paid fellowship, which is the nice thing of this town. And it really, we bring in folks with a graduate degree to work hand in glove with, folks who are working on the programs that I described earlier. And our fellows are based either here in Washington at headquarters or out at our site offices in New Mexico and California. And we really we've been trying to diversify the pool of candidates for that program because it is an important feeder program. In this room right now, there's several graduates of that program that I've worked with and know about. And it feeds not just our organization, but also the interagency, people at state, defense, NGOs, private sector. So if we can use that program to bring greater number of candidates into the field, I think that's a real win-win. I have to say, I went through all the resumes. It's a very competitive program, and was very pleased for incoming class when I went through the resumes late last year. Probably one of the most diverse pool of candidates we have. And that's because we really try to do outreach to a number of universities, including minority servicing institutions, and widen our outreach to universities not just on the coast, but across the country. And I think we're starting to see the benefits of that, and that we really have a good pool of candidates coming in. The other program that we have is the Minority Servicing Institutions Partnership Program. And I have to say, before I talk about this, will make more sense. While we have technical folks at our headquarters who implement our work, we also rely heavily on the DOE and NNSA national laboratories. We have 17 laboratories across the country. They have the technical expertise we need to implement our programs. So the MSIPP program works with minority servicing institutions to kind of build pipelines and partnerships between them and our national laboratories. And so we work with about 40 MSIs, and we've given them grants to develop new curricula, to give their students opportunities in areas like cybersecurity, advanced manufacturing, material and energy science. So those are some of the ways that we've been addressing this issue.
That's helpful. I want to come back to you in a minute here, because it's you're talking about basically stoking the pipeline, right? It's getting in, as early as possible to generate that interest in the work. And I want to come back to that point a little bit more when we talk about tactical level solutions to some of these challenges. But Dover,
can I add a couple things? I mean, when you start the pipeline, you have to get the right mix, as many people as you can into it. But one of the challenges this field faces is the leaky pipeline. There isn't a clear career path, and you may not have the mentors, and especially in the NGO sector where pay is not as good as it can be in other places, there's a lot of incentives to leave the field and go somewhere else. And that means losing hard-earned talent, from the perspective of a foundation or those leading some of these organizations. The other piece of it, though, I want to touch on is when you talk about scoping the problem, I'm not quite sure how well we have it scoped. So at Plowshares Council, we started, our initiative, and we look primarily at gender, but we try to recognize that gender is a wedge that you can use to talk about a range of diversity issues, is that we didn't know how many of our grants went to women-led projects and women-led organizations. So we had to start with we had to create a baseline. And we found it was about 35%. And once we had that, we said, okay, 3 years, let's get to 50. And everything going according to plan, within a couple of weeks, I should be able to say we'll be up to above 40% of our grants going to women-led projects, women-led organizations. Numbers aren't everything, right? But you do have to start picking a few areas that you can say, let's put some effort into it, let's be intentional. And then keep track of how it goes. So, I would say in scoping the problem and what we can learn, that was one of the first pieces we found from other institutions that have worked on this. The first recommendation was collect the data and disaggregate it so that you know exactly what you're working with.
Alex, let's just keep with this theme for a minute if we can. As I said at the outset of the panel, that encouraging diversity is logical, I think, to most organizations, but it's not always intuitive. It's not intuitive in terms of how you actually, what do I do? So before we lead further into it, and I want to come back to Dover's point as well, but in terms of kind of what you're witnessing across the industry as some of the macro level challenges, those barriers, what does that look like?
Just to echo what Michelle was saying, in peace and security specifically, is it a pipeline problem? And I think, Bonnie, you and I have spoken a little bit about this. And if it is, why? If it's not, what are the other problems? Is there a paucity of diverse candidates? Why is that? And sort of working backwards from there. That's the biggest, one of the biggest challenges. And then secondarily, and again, something that Bonnie and I have talked about at length, is retention. And Michelle, you alluded to it, that there aren't sort of pathways, there isn't a lot of opportunity to advance. And so, and other factors, lots of other factors that we've spoken about. So how do we bring folks in and then keep them in and push them up to get to a Stimson level, 70% leadership is led by women and folks of color. So it's kind of both. And I think, in the funding sector, we do talk about metrics as well. So I think I would be remiss not to say we need to figure out how are you tracking these things. So numbers are important because it helps you make the case. So what makes sense to track? How do you track it? How do you benchmark it? I think all those sorts of things. But we actually have within the Peace and Security Funders Group, we have this spreadsheet, called spreadsheets. And it's a choice points spreadsheet. So there are lots of different choices you make every day, and you can be taking different lenses to the choices you make, be it, where you advertise, how you advertise, the language you use when you advertise, to how you hire. Literally, like, are folks looking at people's names, where they went to school? Does that matter? Does it not matter? To what you pay people, how you advance people. What your panels look like, where are you hosting your panels, who's providing the food, everything. I mean, there's internal things or external things that you can be looking at and using this sort of lens throughout. So it's a lot, and I think you just, like I said, you got to start somewhere. So take on what's both meaningful and doable for your institution.
Richard, do you have any thoughts on this particular subject in terms of the barriers that you have sort of seen standing on the other side, looking in on this world? Any thoughts on?
Yeah, I think what our colleagues have said is basically what I've seen. That when I was in school, the main challenge was to remove discrimination against women and other groups. So my mother was my PhD, and people would criticize her, so you should stay home with your family and so on. So we get rid of all that hope, and I haven't heard that one in a while. And so my institution, I just haven't really thought about this issue we have an extensive interview program that does a lot of work on a lot of topics, a lot of different people. But when I look through resumes, I'm looking for language skills, diverse background, subject interest. I didn't really care if it was male, female, African American, or other minority. And often I don't know the gender of the person until I'm asked to write a recommendation. I didn't know that Ms. Herman is. That's because it's invasive. But maybe this isn't good enough. Maybe I need to get a better sense of what the results are. I think we're probably tracking the same as most groups. We have 50-50 gender. We have certainly people here gone through the program have become African American, Latin American women. But it's sort of random, it's not haphazard. It would be useful to understand better the challenges and then look for fixes. What I like about the topic, what I was really attracted to that when the ambassador mentioned to me was, unlike a lot of the issues that I deal with, how to improve cooperation between Russia and the U.S. on Iran or something like that. This problem strikes me as actually you can do actionable things with it. A lot of stuff we do in the other topics, we can raise the issue, we can clarify, but there's so many things beyond our control that it's hard to trace out the thing. Something like this, it's pretty narrow. You have the data, you can think of the solutions, you can actually make some progress. That's why I thought it would be useful to address.
So, thanks for your candor on that. And I want to pick up on a point that you made and just invite anyone here on the panel to react to it. Specifically, as you talk about kind of scoping the problem, but we really don't know how big the problem is or how invasive or insidious it is in truth. And that's true of government, it's true of the philanthropic world, it's true of NGOs, it's true of private sector. So, do you have a sense? Does anyone have a sense, or can you give us leads on efforts? Have you done any work, or have you seen work, Alex, others, in terms of scoping that problem and finding out what those true, tangible barriers are, so that, as you say, we can focus our efforts and hopefully be successful?
I haven't. We have amongst the nuclear funders. So the Peace and Security Funders Group hosts a variety of working groups, one of which is nuclear. Apropos for this audience, and Michelle is on that group, as are others in the nuclear funding field. And one of the things that we were looking at is, as a group, sort of where are we as just narrowly nuclear funders on we were looking at gender through your program, so maybe you can say more about that. But
yeah, so I think there's been more work done in the nuclear space on gender. CNAS has put out some really good studies on a really good study recently on what the barriers were to women getting into the field. New America, Heather Goldberg, has also written extensively on this, had some really great recommendations in a recent Arms Control Today issue. And for us, where we're starting with is actually just looking at, if we look at who submits the proposal, who needs it, and then also their organization, their partner organization, who needs it. And then, coding that internally, and then hopefully being transparent in the coming years of actually saying, this is the percentage of our grants. But what we will start doing is actually, recognizing that can be very problematic, is asking those submitting the proposals to provide that information. Actually start, creating a set of data that we can work with. Again, recognizing it isn't everything. And I would say, as we get into this, what has been, it all started with one question, and it's kind of led to a whole bunch of things. But what's been really helpful is the work that PSFG has done, because I think the one thing I've learned through this is you don't do it by yourself. And people, your colleagues have good ideas. And it's not just the colleagues who lead organizations. I mean, if you want to get a scope of the problem, I would talk to people who've been affected by it, and they'll tell you, no, it's real. Here are the challenges I have faced. Here's where I don't know whether this answer or this decision was something that was bureaucratic, whether there were elements of racism, whether there are elements of sexism, but I can tell you these are the things that did not feel right, or that I encountered and my colleagues didn't. And you can start from there getting some of the qualitative texture to the problem, as well as marrying that with the quantitative. And I think the final piece that I remind myself is this field is, while we will pride ourselves on being unique, we are still a part of American culture. The things that are going on right now, the discussions that are happening in the broader culture are playing out here, and they affect us and we affect them. It's not, we're up on a hill somewhere. So, I don't know if that...
No, it's extremely helpful, and I will say that storytelling, that sort of sharing of, these brave women who have stood up in the Me Too movement have been such a remarkable, sort of eye-opening experience for we who kind of live in a much more privileged space. I will tell you from experience, when I took on my current position and began having conversations with senior directors across the organization and females who live I had no idea. You live in a completely different world than I live in, right? That we've not, solved that problem by any means on the gender side. And it's been an eye-opening experience, and I'm so grateful to you all who are willing to stand up and say, here's what happened, because I think it helps the rest of us kind of have a better understanding of the complexity and, as I say, insidiousness of the bladder challenge. But before we slide into complete dark place here, I think it is, as I mentioned earlier, it's helpful that the sharing of success stories and demonstrating what works and then replicating what works, I think is one clear pathway, I think, to a much more diverse and inclusive workspace. So, Michelle Dashball, I'm going to come back to you if I may, and ask you. So you mentioned a couple of programs that NNSA has initiated. Can you say a little bit more about kind of the success stories? Have we seen kind of the benefit of that? Are we starting to see what has worked basically in some of these programs and others that you may have been exposed to?
Sure. So I have to say I've been at NNSA. I was at DOE before NNSA was created. So I'm dating myself, and I've been at NNSA basically for about 17 years now.
But you started when you were 6, though.
But what I found from my own experience is that I had to be proactive, seeking out opportunities, and talking to mentors. I think getting back to what's been said by some of the other panelists, mentoring and networking are key parts of this. Because, and some of your best mentors may be peer mentors. I think back to my own career and turning points, and these were friends in college and grad school who said, hey, you found out this, and I had not. That got me into the field. I started off at the Ford Foundation, actually. And so this was in the late 90s, and we were probably the only funder funding a lot of the NGOs doing work in this space. And then I went to DOE after that, and that was because my boss at Ford knew people at DOE and introduced me. And so I'm definitely a product of this networking, mentoring, and I think it's key to continue those. We need to, I'm also part of the International Career Advancement Program, which is a network of people of color in international affairs fields, government, NGOs, private sector, and it's a great network because, if you're thinking of a career change, you can shoot out an email to folks, and usually there's someone in the network who can help you. And I think that's key to kind of moving your career forward. And having a mentor. Your best mentor may not be within your own organization. I've had mentors from outside my organization. You can speak a little more frankly with them about challenges, and these are things we have to have in place for young people and mid-career people. Some of the mid-career people, how do you get to the next level? If you're in the government, how do you get to the senior executive service? So I think the mentoring and the networking are key. And what I just urge folks to do, I don't do enough of it myself, is take a young person to lunch, take a young person out for coffee, tell your story, ask them, what they want to do. You'll find out a lot about them. Maybe you're not the best mentor for them, but you can identify someone who can help them. And so I think these things are key, and it's spending time with people to learn about their stories and how you can help.
That's really helpful. Alice, success stories. What's worked? Have you seen things that have worked?
We PSFG just started on our sort of organizational and network, I would say, journey in this space, and so not yet. The one thing I can think of, and my colleague Genevieve's here, so perhaps she can think of something else. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but if you think of anything, shout it out. I was going to say our current fellow, we did a very concerted effort to not sort of send it out to our own networks. So we went outside of our own networks. We paid $15 an hour, which is a lot. It's above a living wage in DC. We went out and we talked at a lot of sort of local universities, as well as partnering with different programs around the country, and got a lot of really great diverse applicants. And that was us. We're a tiny 4-person nonprofit, and we'd never had this kind of diverse applicant pool before. But it was a lot of work, but it's worth it because you get that. And so that's, for me, that's a success story of an internal sort of management-y success story. And our fellow started last week, and he's great. He already finished all these summer projects, and so we're like, oh man, what else do we do? So great on both ends, internally and externally. So that's the first one. But like I said, we just launched our DEI initiative last week. So come back in a year and I'll give you some more success there.
So let me follow up with you. I'm going to ask you a personal quiz. We're going to get real now.
Let's get
Toma, for your own career, so you've had this quite remarkable career that has, as I mentioned, that has taken you from private sector, through the NGO, through government, through... Tell me what Michelle sort of shares, because of this mentorship constantly. Yeah. What has worked for you? How did you manage to climb up?
Yeah, mentors. 4 mentors from grad school, and every time I was kind of itching to get try a different sector, try a new job, I contacted them, took them out to lunch, and so, they're very senior, actually all white men, but that's, who my grad school professors were. So anyway, but, took them out to lunch, asked them for their advice and help in sort of figuring out what next for me. And that's sort of what opened up doors for me to sort of explore. I'd never thought philanthropy, never. I have a master's in national security. Didn't think I would work on the Hill, didn't think I would work in the private sector, but sort of with their guidance and mentorship, and help sort of opening the door, I was able to try different things and sort of ping pong up in my career. So I would 100% echo what you said. And I actually, for myself, I try as much as I can, as much as my schedule allows, to meet with young people for coffee, lunch, even just like an informational 15-minute, 20-minute phone call. Even if I don't personally know them, someone recommends them or they find me somehow, I'll take the time.
Michelle, for a shy person like myself, who does not want to reach out and invite someone to lunch, how else does...
So I have actually kind of 3 different looks at when you say what works. There's this question of what does it mean for the field? What changes because we have a more inclusive community? We are supporting some work at New America that is looking at this. We have some theories looking at who has led negotiations for the U.S. in arms control these past 2 rounds, looking at who took a leadership position in land treaty negotiations, in part because there were questions about whether this was something that, those who have been in the field a long time wanted to do. I think there is some actual interesting stories, qualitative, because it is such a small sample, that can come out of what the actual impact is of, whose interests are represented and what does it mean for, when we think about national security, protecting many different populations, not just the capitals of countries. And then in terms of what works, well, how do organizations change? How do you seal up the leaks in the pipeline to create a better pipeline? I think the number one thing is boards and senior staff leadership have to make this their issue. So Plowshares is doing this not because I came along and was like, this is my issue, we're definitely going to do this. It was because the president of our organization and our board is 100% behind it, and they think it's something that we should be moving faster on. Period, full stop. And that's the only way an organization is going to change. It shouldn't be on the junior staff to try to change it. And then the next question that comes with it is then how do you institutionalize it, which this becomes an organizational change thing, not necessarily, diversity, equity, inclusion is this unique thing. So that's kind of how I've seen it. And I think the other piece of it too, from what works in the business sector, sponsorships, not mentorships, sponsorships, where it is your duty once you decide that that's the person you're going to sponsor, it is your duty to advocate for them for different opportunities. Because with mentorship, there's a little bit of it's volunteer, it doesn't apply all the time, like what actually are my responsibilities to the person I am mentoring. When you talk about sponsorship, that's much more clear. And that usually works in larger organizations, but I think there's still ways that model can be adopted for the nonproliferation field. And then for me personally, I mean, it's really funny that Michelle brought up NGP. I am an NGP alum. And I would not have gotten into the nonproliferation field if it wasn't the active work of the Department of Energy reaching out to try and recruit. I came from the middle of the country, very different background. This is not something my family does. I would not be here if it was not those programs. That said, there have been a lot of challenges of like, what does a career path look like? How do you go from government to outside government? Where do you go once you get outside government? Part of it has just been locked in the things that I know I've stumbled across. But, a lot of those opportunities have come through talking to peers, talking to mentors. And I think that's where the challenge comes from in part, right? It's a recognition that you do have to put yourself out there. This is not a space that is conducive for, sitting back and letting things come to you. And, there's a real question. Is that something we should change? How do we make it so you don't have to do so much work to try to stay in the field? But I would say at this point, there are things that others should be doing, all of us should be doing, because I think, this is the other piece, right? Foundations are not, they're a part of the same community. What we look like, how we staff, all of those things that Alex is talking about apply to us as well. And so, I think there's some things that we can do in a shared way, definitely. But it's the responsibility of the community as a whole, not just on those things.
Thank you for that. Richard, just I want to turn to the audience here in a second, but just on this theme of success stories, you and I had a quick conversation earlier about Hudson's internship program and some of the unique things that, can you say a few words about that?
Sure, and just a reminder, when we transition to the broader level, if people want to ask a question or make a comment, just email to me at weitz@hudson.org, and I'll pass along everybody. Yeah, the one aspect of Hudson has a very broad internship program that it involves a lot of people, and it's a bit different than most, and it requires entry or low. So you don't need to be DC, NBC, it's virtual. We allow people to drop in, drop out. Some of the people are here, a lot of them are not, but are watching online. I didn't design it this way, but it would seem to me that kind of structure has been helpful for getting people who have, for example, want to transition into the field or have family responsibilities or can't afford to come to DC to participate. So in theory, and I hope to work with you and Dr. Jenkins to questions, how this kind of a mechanism could help pursue some of the goals we're talking about.
That's very helpful. All right, we're going to turn to the audience here in 2 seconds, but let me just ask one more question of the panel here, and we can jump in on this. But specifically, I would like to hear actually from Alex and Michelle on these sort of, as we project out, where do we go from here? What are the remaining, maybe Alex, this question's for you, what are sort of the remaining questions that the funding community has around the diversity and inclusion space, and as we set ourselves up?
Yeah, I mentioned, so what is that? What is the problem? What are the problems, I should say? What are the root causes? How do you address them? How do you benchmark them? How do you measure that you're making progress towards them? I think those are sort of the biggest remaining questions. To your point earlier, Brian, what's the sort of Chinese menu of options of how do you tackle these? But you can't unless you have a sense of the problem and defining the problem. It's hard to sort of chip away here and then chip away here, and then you're not really actually getting at it. So I think that's the biggest remaining. And I think there is some, to your earlier point or question, is and Bonnie, you talked a little bit about this as well, is is there a comprehensive analysis in our specific sector about where we're at, sort of what's the baseline, and then what can we be doing to address that baseline challenge or those challenges? So those are big questions, but they remain.
Michelle, what more can your agency be doing?
So again, I've been there for a long time, and I've seen over the years having the fellowship program in my specific division, defense, nuclear nonproliferation, and gender. It's been very successful in bringing in women. So now in my division, it's 50-50. So I think it's a good model to work to bring in more people of color. This is a developmental opportunity, so you're not locked into hiring this person. So this is a chance, this is a time to give someone a chance to excel, because it's a year. You can see what the person can do, but then you don't have to hire the person at the end of the year. And so I think the NGFP has been a really good model for us in terms of gender. I think it can also work in terms of racial and ethnic diversity. And their MSIP project obviously is specifically focused on minority servicing institutions and helping to diversify our labs. Again, as I mentioned, our labs play a key role in supporting our non-proliferation work. So I think just strengthening those programs for NGFP, strengthening our outreach to more MSIs, and just continuing our outreach to strong regional universities as well. Because a number of our fellows are from regional universities.
Helpful. Thank you. So Dover, take us out. Give us the lowers. Give your grantees and the audience here and tuning in across the world. What is the one thing they can be doing? One kind of tangible action that they can take.
They can actually think about the problem, or if they're already thinking about it, share what they're doing. Share what works for your organization. Share what challenges you've seen. I think the other piece of it is this is where foundations are on, at a 30,000-foot view, and for that reason, I don't know necessarily what some of the frontline challenges are. Those are helpful, and we will be putting in questions in our proposals in this coming year and in our reporting to help try to capture this information. We will be making it clear as well how we consider gender when we evaluate and vet the proposals. So, the way we look at it is, at least in my area, through the life cycle of the proposal process. Who are you soliciting projects from? What's the topic? Who's leading on it? What are the activities look like, and who are they working with? What's the reporting? And in each of those is a point at which we can incorporate a gender lens into it. And so, we're always happy to share what we're doing, how we're thinking of it, because we do think of this as a community challenge, not just a fascist challenge.
So no one gets a free cup of coffee and power bar at the Hudson Institute. So we really want to hear from you all as well. So please, sir.
Yeah, my name is Benny Garcia. Thank you to Michelle and also the ambassador for telling me about this group and the great work you do. One thing I was curious about is you talked about the pipeline coming in, but I see this in other areas, particularly in government. But what is being done for take folks from the mid-level to the senior level? I think it's very good you're asking, who's leading this team, what are the members of the team, but I'm just curious if there are success stories or things that we've learned doesn't work. Because I'm not, things are a lot more hopeful than when I entered government service, and I'm thankful for that, but I think I would have liked to have seen more advancement as far as folks going from the mid-level to the senior level. I have my own ideas, but I'm curious what you all could share about how do we do that, because it's great to get everybody in, but if they don't move up, they're going to leave for a variety of reasons.
Great question. So I'm going to propose, because this is a non-proliferation panel, at the end of the day, we're going to merge a couple of questions here. You like that?
Well done.
You can use that. And we'll just take a couple, and then we'll come back to the panel. Ma'am?
I just wanted, it's a bit of a comment and also a bit of a question. I just graduated with my master's degree in security studies, and many others that graduated in my class do not have a job and are still working at Whole Foods or a bar or wherever. And that is very intimidating to people looking at wanting to get into this type of thing. Hey, I can move to DC, I can spend all this money, I can get all these internships, and I still don't have a job at the end? Nope, I'm choosing something else. So I think that that's something that we really need to think about. And one of the things that's very much worked for the people who do have jobs in that program, in fact, all of us who have jobs got it by getting an internship and then converting that into a job. And, you know, that's hard. I mean, you can have a lot of internships before that actually happens, and that's not the organization's fault. It's just there's not a lot of positions open currently. So what are your guys' thoughts about how do you help create those opportunities and how to make this pipeline still attractive to people who aren't seeing jobs at the end of the tunnel?
Thank you for that. And then we'll take one more right here, ma'am.
I think when we talk about, I think I'm going to go off of your question, but I talk about entry points. There may be hiring challenges. I know that we kind of touched upon that. Particularly challenges of trying to get into the government with security clearances. There are people with diverse backgrounds out there. I think it's just difficult to just secure a clearance and then move on. What can we do to just make it easier for people with diverse backgrounds to take that big jump into government positions? We're really grateful for Simpsons to Hudson's to other think tank communities that take us in. But what about the government and people with diverse backgrounds?
Great question. All right, so 3 questions here on the table. One in terms of mid-career advancement, one in terms of that very early pipeline and creating opportunities, and then one specifically, Michelle, on is the clearance procedure a barrier in and of itself to encouraging greater diversity and opportunities? So, who would like to go first?
I'll go first. So the mid-career, I'm really glad you brought this up, and I really encourage you to read the report that CMAS put out on it, because they detail exactly what the challenges were for that mid-career and moving into senior leadership. I have some of my own theories. I think the most recent election, for example, politics aside, it meant that because of the lens that the administration was applying of who actually was accepted into the administration meant that those from most think tanks and most standard feeders into the government were not going in. And so you had a bunch of people come out, you had no one from those spots going in, and so literally there is a lack of spots where you do in DC tend to have turnover every 4 years. And I think those points are really key for when to change things. They're a unique opportunity to change the makeup of an organization. But I think your point about intentionality is key. And I haven't been in the field long enough to say how intentional various organizations have been about that. But I think going forward, at least from my organization's perspective, trying to ask that question before we make that decision to make sure that we are considering where our own biases and blind spots may be coming into play is really important. And in terms of the entry-level jobs, you're right. I'm affirming everything. It's difficult, and it's a combination of hard work and luck. And I think there's conversations that we can have about the shrinking number of foundations supporting this area, whether the models that organizations use to raise money, is catching up, is up to the needs that the community has. And so this is where the question about diversity actually leads into the other conversations about organizational strength that are already going on. And what I would hope is that this conversation doesn't become siloed. because I think it should be taking place within the broader discussions that a board of an organization may have of like, what are we actually doing to prepare ourselves for the next 5 years and the challenges it brings?
Great point. Others? Michelle?
I'll jump in on the clearance issue because getting a clearance can be lengthy. And our fellowship program, we have people apply early because we try to get them their clearances. And so folks who've traveled a lot and lived overseas, it just takes longer because, they need to do a lot of background checks. So the process can be lengthy. And so that can be a deterrent. I'm not going, it can be a deterrent to folks who think, well, I need to get a job. Will I get my clearance in time for the start date of my job? If I can't get a clearance, then what? I may have gotten a job, but if it's contingent on me getting a clearance, and I think it's going to take a year, or I can't wait that long. And so that is a challenge. And I think we in our fellowship program try to get people to apply. We have very early application deadlines so that we can start working on the clearances early on. But usually folks don't have the clearance by the time of the start date of the fellowship, but we have people sitting in unclassified space. They can still do some work for us. And we make sure when we have an unclassified list of duties that people can work on while they wait to get their clearance, they're still getting paid. So our fellowship is one of the few, I think, that kind of, you can still do some work while you wait for your clearance to come through. And I think that's why it's so attractive and why it's so competitive. On jobs after fellowships, our fellows have had a phenomenal rate of getting employment if they do not stay with us, of getting employed by other employers because the fellowship has such a good reputation. But I can see that some other fellowships you finish and you may not have something waiting at the end, and that is so we could lose people that way out of the pipeline. They may have that first or even second internship or fellowship, and then they can't get something permanent, and they leave the field. And what was the last one? The mid-career. It goes back to my few things, mentoring and networking. I know I'm harping on it, but if you're not moving up in your agency or your organization, maybe you need to consider a different path. And that's where the mentoring, that's where the networking is so key. Because at some point in time, if you're in an organization, you feel that maybe there's no room for growth. It doesn't matter if it's government, NGO, private sector, and you want to consider career change. That's where the mentors and the networks become so important. So as soon as you get into this field, you really need to get yourself out there and talking to people in the community.
Very good. So as a Canadian, I can attest to the barriers to entry. We have different problems. We could be in a shooting war by the end of the week, so it's a different issue altogether. Man, let's go right here, and then we'll go to you.
Sorry, I wandered in late, so sorry if I've already addressed this. And this has kind of come up in a couple of different contexts, but I wanted to ask if there's kind of the fellowship issue and getting the first job issue. But over the course of my past few years here, what I've really seen has not just been, okay, women kind of come into the field or women are interested in the field, they get that first job, and then by year 3, they leave the field entirely. And especially, and it's not just, it's women, it's younger women, it's more diverse women of color, to the point where from when I started interning and then got my first position, most of those people who were kind of in my cohort are no longer in the field at all. So I just wanted to ask, your thoughts on that and whether that's something that organizations are addressing or thinking about, is why that drop-off is occurring or what is leading to that.
And would you tell these fine folks who you are?
Sure. I'm Deepika Chaudhry with Read Media.
Hi, I have sort of a different kind of question, but similar. So we talked about entering the pipeline and we talked about the leaky pipeline, but what about on-ramps along the way? So I retired from the military last year. I'm in law school. I really want to work in this field. Internships, more than happy to do them, but they seem like kind of an odd fit for somebody at my point in my career. where I don't feel like the person who hires me is getting all they can get out of me, and maybe I'm not getting all I can get out of the experience as well. How do you work this sort of on-ramp or mid-career sort of switch into the field?
Great question.
I'll stand because I can't see the panel. I'm Sarah Kocheska-Harney from the Center for Arms Control and Nonproliferation. Michelle Dashboard, I have a question specifically for you. It's very different from what's been discussed. I'm more curious on the international level. So you mentioned in your role, you engage with a lot of foreign partners. And so my question is, when you have these kind of discussions on nonproliferation, international security, do you still see the absence of women behind the table? Do you still see so I'm wondering, is this just a United States problem? I mean, I don't think it is, but I'm wondering, when you go across the world and you have these kinds of conversations, are we seeing the same trends? Because if it's a global problem, I'm wondering if any of you on the panel, but especially you, Michelle, are there things that we can do globally? Thank you.
That's a great question. We're going to take one more and then we'll get to next.
Thank you. Kelsey Davenport with the Arms Control Association. Thank you for an excellent discussion. From some of my own experiences, it often feels like in this field that urgency is the enemy of diversity, and that when things get very hectic, when things get very frantic, a lot of very well-meaning ideas about the promotion of women and promotion of diversity kind of get thrown out the window. So I'd be interested in the panel's thoughts on how we address that, so we look at these questions in a more sustainable manner. And then I guess a specific subset of that is, how do you then ensure kind of on the grant making side that kind of what is put on paper for these metrics is actually kind of followed through? And again, that comes to urgency, sometimes throwing things out the window. Thank you.
Question, Kelsey. Okay, so questions on retention, questions on on-ramps in terms of mid-career professionals who are looking to gain access to the field. Question on kind of geographic, breadth of this challenge. Is this a unique challenge in the United States, or have we seen success stories elsewhere? And then one on kind of prioritization and ensuring that there is sustainability of these efforts as well.
I'll jump in. Okay, so I'll just sort of take one of them. In terms of the global Cesara's question, we are a global network of funders. We have European-based funders, African-based funders, and here in the U.S., obviously. And its diversity is different. There are different challenges in different countries in terms of, just how you tackle this. So that's a struggle for us, and with our membership, how do you address this so that it's meaningful to whatever their context is? And I don't. It's just different. It's not the U.S. is better or worse or whatever. It's just different. It's not exactly what you were asking, Michelle. So that's I'll let you answer that. And in terms of the mid-career, I don't know. I went straight through to grad school. But I had friends who were, teachers. I went to grad school to sort of use it as a pivot, and they did internships just like I did as a 21-year-old. They were 31 or 41, and they were doing internships. It's not a satisfactory answer. I don't know if, maybe Brian has a better, maybe you have ideas, maybe you see more folks, but, we'll take all sorts. The age or the sort of that, I don't think much matters, at least for us. So I'll stop there.
Michelle, do you want to?
Sure. So I would have to kind of talk to my colleagues to give you a better answer on that. But from my experience, I have seen. I've been working mainly on China-related issues. I have seen some senior women across the table from me, and I've sat across some people with just men. And so it can vary, but can't really give you a good answer on that. I'd have to kind of consult with my colleagues who work with some other countries. People leaving after 2 to 3 years, I think that is a challenge. I think probably more so and I'm just guessing, on the nonprofit sector, because I think when people get into the government sector, they usually tend to stay a little longer. So I have to turn to my colleagues to get their insights on the nonprofit sector, but I think when we get folks into our sector, the work's exciting, it's challenging. We're working on U.S. national security issues, and the mission, is very exciting, so people tend to stay with us. It's hard. It's hard to get into the field in government, but I think once people are there, they tend to stay. And most young men with a career. That's a tough one, and that's where, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but talking to people who are in the field admin career, how do you get? Is there a space for me, to come, and how is the best way for me to do that? To really, I would talk to a variety of people before you commit to any one internship or fellowship to just see, after the end of this, is there something viable long term?
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, so looking at, I think it's kind of interesting that 3-year drop-off questions would be and the mid-career questions are kind of in the same ballpark. And as you can tell, there are no satisfactory answers. Mid-career in general, I think that layer in the NGO community is just a tough problem. I would be curious to hear your thoughts on it because you probably think about it more closely than I do. I think there are fellowships that you can do. I think encouraging, looking at opportunities on the Hill, looking at opportunities in government, there's been a couple different places in the sector. I think there's value to moving around. At least that's worked for me. And sometimes another sector that's still working on these issues may have more opportunities than another one does at the moment. And then to pick up on Kelsey's question about urgency being the enemy of diversity, it's interesting you say that. So for us, the way I can only respond to how we tackled it. And that was we set year-end goals for ourselves that we had to report out to our board on how we're doing. And so, it meant that our team was responsible for actually monitoring the progress we were making towards those goals. And since we have a board meeting approximately every 3 months, it does force you to make sure that you're doing it. We try to build as much of the work as we can into the points where we know we're going to be doing the work, which is why I was describing the proposal cycle. If we can add in some of these conversations, some of these questions, and actually build it into the processes we're already doing, similar to the way cleaning people market things to you, where they know they have certain points where they can say, and then we're going to insert this product. I swear it's a thing. You can insert this product and that's why you're going to use Febreze, because you always take a look around the room and, take satisfaction in a job well done. If I can find those same intuitive points in our grant making cycle to make it so that this isn't a burden, this is just what you do, and it fits in with the flow of the work, it's more likely to be sustained and you're more likely to maintain progress. And the question on grant making, what's on paper and what happens, that's just a question more broadly. It's not just this. Things like questions on diversity, I recognize it's a scary subject and everyone wants to put forward their best image, their best foot. But there's only so much that I can do as a grant maker. I have to trust the grantee and the partner on this. You try to have as many conversations as you can, and I think the way I approach it is share my own questions, my own challenges, and try to make that the norm, as opposed to but how is it going to affect, whether or not we get a grant? And so that's the other reason we're going to be putting up a list of just a basic description of how we actually incorporate it, so it isn't so scary. But I think at the end of the day, it's not like the grant agreements are a magic wand that can be used to make sure that things happened, or else we probably would have solved all the problems in non-proliferation a long time ago.
Thanks, Michelle. Richard, do you want to jump in on any of these?
No, I've seen the problem and at all the different points of entry, saying that the fact it's really good, you can make a lot more money in the private sector. I guess the one thing I have noticed is that the public gains administration, it was, they did take something.
They did.
They took like the lane out.
Yes, but it was much fewer.
But I think more serious has been, there have been hiring freezes, and it took them so long to find the senior people. They were waiting, but I think now that process seems to be opening up. So I'm hoping there'll be more openings for mid and younger people people who want to work with this administration to go in and do that. And of course, we have congressional elections, and then when people speculate about a change, there'll be new opportunities there.
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
Yes, this one is just comment on something everyone said. First of all, this is a great panel, so thanks again for doing this. And of course, thanks to the listeners with us. Alice, I really want folks to hear what you said about the effort that you went through this to get to hire your intern and thinking creatively and understanding that it may take a little more time to do it, because I think it's too easy for organizations to just use the usual steps, which are not always successful. So I think we need to approach this in a new way, in a different way, and think about it creatively, and that's the way to make change. So I want to make sure people heard what you said about that. Michelle, I just want to make sure you heard what you said about the work that you've been doing and effort that the NNSA has been doing with the reaching to different colleges and universities, getting outside the beltway, getting outside the coast. I mean, you go inside the U.S., I think is another creative way to try to bring in diversity. So I think that's a lesson learned, and that's something that we should build upon. So I want to hear that. Richard, I love what you said about this. This is something we can actually try to do something about. I think that is. It's always good to approach a problem with an understanding that we can make change. And I like what you said, and some of these other problems that we can talk about. And we do that, that's what we do. Because if you don't talk about it, you can't try to make a difference with some of these hard problems. But still there are problems that we can try to fix. And I like what you said. Michelle, I like your point about working with the CEOs and people, because a lot of it is culture. And a lot of reasons why I think we lose people after we get them in, there's two challenges. One is getting people in and then keeping them. And both are difficult. And too often I think people say, we got them in, now we're okay. But people don't stay because the culture may not be accepted. And the only way they're going to be accepted is if people on the top say, this has got to be the way it's going to be, which means it has to permeate everything in the organization. Not just in bringing them in, but how do you feel comfortable? One of my issues, and I want to explore this more, and I work with Christian and Brian, is there's a great program, the Pickering program, for example, and the programs that bring people to the State Department. But where are they? I mean, I was an ambassador to the State Department for almost 8 years with our administration. Where is everybody? What's happening to all the people that's coming in? So my question is, I think there's a lot of cultural issues at state, and there's a lot of cultural issues in other departments, and in jail, wherever. But we have to create a culture where people stay. And that comes from the top. And it has to permeate everything. And Brian, you're just amazing. I look forward to working with you and Richard and others who want to be involved in this conversation beyond today on picking up some of the great points you guys have put forward and thinking creatively about how do we make things happen and how do we take what you did, Alex, and make that a way that we do it all the time. So that we can bring in more women, bring in more people of color into not just this field, which I find to be one of the more difficult fields to bring in diversity, but also how do we do in other areas of peace and security. Thank you.
So 15-minute break now, and then we'll do some of the second panel.
Thank you for joining Women of Color, Advancing Peace and Security. Please visit WCAPS.org. That's WCAPS.org.